Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 83. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. We are both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Awesome, Nick. Hey, it is the holiday weekend as we're recording this, so I hope you're doing well. I think this is probably going to go out just after the holiday, though. So hope our American listeners are having a good holiday weekend.
Yeah, we've definitely heard some fireworks outside, but you know what, John? That is not nearly as explosive as the content that we have for listeners this week.
Ooh, that's right. Who are we talking to this week?
We're talking to Brad Pinkston. He's a director of global solutions consultants at VMware, a guy who's been in management for several years, and I thought he'd had some great nuggets to share with our listeners. You know, we've had some folks on to talk about that journey to management, and this is just another great perspective, I think.
Awesome. If you are thinking about people management as a career path, this is going to be a great episode for you to listen to. And of course, in classic Nerd Journey fashion, it's going to be great 2 episodes for you to listen to. So here's Brad Pinkston on the path to people management. Brad Pinkston, thanks for joining us on the Nerd Journey podcast.
Absolutely, guys. It's a pleasure. It's been a while since I gotten to see either one of y'all.
Can you tell us who you are and what you do, what your day-to-day job is right now?
Yeah, certainly. So, Brad Pinkston, I am currently a director of global solutions consultants at VMware. So what that actually means, if you decipher my title, is my team's responsible for the technical side of the sales relationship for 6 of our global brands. So that includes Apple, Intel, McKesson, Walgreens, PNC Bank, and Chevron. So my team is responsible for just the overall technical sales relationship between those companies and VMware.
Gotcha. So I think we might have mentioned it before, but a lot of sales organizations tend to segment their business into kind of aisles or categories. And at VMware, I believe the globals are kind of the largest of the large, right in the title, companies that oftentimes span more than one continent.
You got it. Yeah, it would be those companies that operate in every theater, right? Americas, EMEA, APJ, and to the comment about the largest companies, like I think the overall segment even in the business is only like 140 customers, and that includes all the different theaters.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
Wow. And a solutions consultant, is that a fancy name for an SE? Or is it something different?
Yes, I would say it is a fancy name for an SE. I mean, I think it does, highlight the role is a little bit different, but not significantly different. The same way that, what people would expect out of an enterprise SE, where they represent the whole company, across every different business unit, every different solution. My team does the exact same thing.
I would imagine that just as there's a difference between people who play that role for medium-sized businesses and the enterprise segment, there's maybe larger companies have larger problems, requiring slightly different skill sets. That's again the case when you move to globals. Just even larger organizations have even larger problems, and sometimes they can be chopped up into many organizations.
Yeah, very true. And a lot of times, I remind my team that while our customers are having the same problems that enterprise customers are having, VMware has just invested more in their time so that they can dig in deeper. My each of my team only has one customer, where your normal enterprise SE might have 3 to 5 or something like that. So my guys just get the opportunity to dig in and build a deeper relationship and put a custom spin on those same problems, where it might be a sales play or just a canned response that you would have with another customer. So I would say that that's the difference in the SE or the global solutions consultant, other than the title, but it doesn't mean the job's significantly different.
Gotcha. So if we go back in our time machine, Brad, can you talk a little bit, just briefly, about how you got to where you are and what made you want to go into people management?
Well, it matters how far back in the time machine we go, Nick. But if I go, all the way back, I like, there's a few, I guess decision points, or things that I think about as pivotal moments in my career. I I won't go any further back than when I moved to Dallas, but I was actually an IT director and IT department of two. So let's not get too focused on the director title, right? But I wanted to find something more security at a bigger company. And so the first opportunity that I had, which was out of, the admin and engineer uh, kind of role and skill set that I'd played for a long time, was a project management position. I knew that my longer term career goal was to get into pre-sales, technical sales type role. And unbeknownst to me, in my logic at that time, it made sense to me, working with people, dealing with customers, that kind of thing. A project management role made sense. You know, Now fast forward 15 years, and I have yet to hire an SE that came from a project management background. So I didn't know that I was creating kind of a unicorn, situation when I decided that this was a good path. But it somehow ended up working for me. I still use those skills, that kind of thing. So I just, I always think about that when I think about my career path. But
Can I ask a quick question
absolutely
about that? It's always interesting because when we think about who we hire for these types of positions, project management and juggling of multiple threads is always a skill that's important. Yet it's not necessarily something, like you said, that we look for in the background of actual formal project management. Or, you never see in these listings, proficient with MS Project, or you have to know what a Gantt chart is. And almost in none of these trainings do we actually provide, like internally, do we provide project management training? Do you have a take on that? I know that's a wide open question, but you mentioned project management, so.
I think that they are skills that are important, but I think that just the level of capability is probably the thing, because you mentioned Gantt charts and MS Project and things like that. If someone finds the necessity to be so organized that that they use tools and tools like that drive them, then I think, to me, it might be it might be a note of the fact that it's hard for them to adapt to all the requirements and reprioritizing that comes with a role like an SE job. Does that make sense? Have you guys experienced the same thing?
Yeah, I would say, the SE job doesn't seem to be timeline driven the same way. Maybe like we use like a reverse timeline for the customer, right? If the customer has a requirement that a solution has to be deployed by a certain time, then we have to take that as a constraint and say, well, to work backwards, we need to have all our technical validation done by this date, or else, you're just going to miss that your date constraint. But at the same time, we feel like we need to stay flexible, right?
Yeah. The most valuable skill that I think that helped me, or project management helped me, that I use today, and I think whether people have a formal project management background or whether it's informal, is, I tell my team all the time that to a large extent, their job is harder than mine, because they're leading a team a lot like a project manager, but they're leading a team where nobody reports to them. They don't have any ability to hire, fire, determine who's on their team. They've got to lead with the carrot. They can't lead with the stick. And so, as a project manager, I think a lot of those skills that allowed me to, influence others and lead a very disjointed team have helped me in my career as an SE. And, a lot of the more successful SEs that I've seen in their careers do look at their job as, you don't have to be a manager to lead people. And, those people, or those SEs that see their job as leading a team of people focused on, one goal with the customer at the heart of that, they're the ones that are the most successful. So I think that part of project management stays true as an individual contributor as an SE or in SE leadership.
And in your case, you went into technical project management, not just like a different industry completely, right?
Yeah. I actually, I started at EMC way back. Yeah, back in 2008. Oh no, it was even further back than 2008. 2006 is when I started. Wow. It makes me feel old. That makes me feel old, but the 4-year-old and 8-year-old in my living room don't.
Well, you're not as old as John. Most of our guests aren't.
Wow. Shots fired.
Oh, I'll move on past that, John, so that Nick doesn't shoot another shot at your direction. But yeah, I started in technical project management, and did that for 2 years with the ultimate goal. And I gathered some skills while I was at EMC as a project manager, and found a way into, I think we were called technical consultants back then, TCs. It's funny how all the companies that don't call their SEs, the acronym still sounds the same. TC, SC. Like they all sound the same, so that the customer knows, who we are, because SE is just universal. But I was a TC at EMC for a few years, and maybe this is shots fired. I guess it doesn't matter because the company is now Dell. But actually now being a manager and a leader, I actually left EMC because I knew that I didn't want to be a manager in that company. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do what these managers have to do. And now looking back, I just know that it was just a different style. It like that style didn't fit me. But I came to VMware to build on my career. I came for the career opportunities, and I've stayed because of the culture and the ability to be who I am. And that's what encouraged me to move into people leadership. I thought that was the next step, right? I'm an individual contributor. Now I've got to be a manager.
It sounds like that was on your mind even while you were an individual contributor at EMC, though. Like, if one of your reasons for leaving was you didn't think that you could be a manager in that organization, that implies you're already thinking about it at that point in your career.
I think that's probably a fair thing, John. Like I think I didn't now at that point in time. I don't think I knew that you could do it any differently. I thought that's how you had to be a manager. And then when I come over to VMware and I spent 4 years as a specialist SE and then a core SE, and I saw that all these leaders that I worked for did things completely differently, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I do want to do that, and realized that I got the most out of like I felt the best at my job when I was a specialist SE and contributed to the team win, and that kind of motivated me and drove me to uh, finding a management job, and I've been doing that since October of 2015. So it's been
Now,
a great ride.
did someone at EMC, anyone, encourage you to pursue management? You said that you figured that was the next step, but I didn't know if that was because someone told you it was, or you came to that realization on your own.
No, I'll admit back then, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't have encouraged me to go into management. So no, nobody encouraged me to go into management. Uh, but no, it was just the fact that the typical thing, career path, you're an individual contributor and then you become a manager. And now I'm lucky enough to be smarter than I was back then and realize that there's so many different ways, at least in the in to remove that shot across the bow at EMC. I know more about Dell EMC as well, and there's tons of opportunities at Dell EMC, at VMware, at almost any big company that has a great culture like these do. That there's tons of opportunities to be a leader without necessarily having to be a manager or be a people manager. It's just something that I do enjoy: people management, mentorship, being the that part of the team.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think you're pointing out that maybe one way to judge a good organization to work for is whether or not they have a career path for individual contributors that doesn't involve managing people. Like, well, I guess by definition, you stay an individual contributor, but you continue, climbing the ladder of increased responsibility, increased scope of role, those kinds of things, and increased pay, obviously. And if an organization doesn't have that, then the only rule is to become a manager. And unless that's exactly what it is that you want to do, then you might want to rethink, that organization as a choice, depending on how long you plan on being there, I guess.
Right. No, I think that's a great point, John. And the thing that I think is interesting as well is depending on how you see your career going, it's not always, up and to the right like you would think of as a career ladder, right? I actually was talking to my team today about an opportunity that came up that is a diagonal move, completely out of our org, and like I've been lucky enough to have people on my team that on all of my teams where I want to make sure that we retain them at the company. So if they end up being in a place where they're bored, and whether it's the customer or the technology or even me that can't keep them engaged and excited about their job, I would much rather encourage them to find something that isn't in that up and to the right normal career progression of an SE, and find something else at the company so that they're happy at and stay at VMware.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that that probably speaks to you as a quality manager. I would say that not every manager, apocryphally, not every manager is like that, right? But the higher quality of an organization that you're at, the more likely, that type of culture of management, is set. And as a result, the more likely you run into that kind of attitude, probably.
Yeah, I think you're right. The culture of the organization helps drive whether that's something that you can do, right? I mean,
Right.
I wouldn't be it wouldn't be possible for me to encourage somebody to take a role in a different organization if the overall culture of VMware didn't encourage that.
Right. Right. So maybe you could talk to us about that decision to, go for a people management role at VMware. Um, was that, a conscious decision that you prepared for a couple of years, or did it like slowly creep up on you and then you started to make changes, or was it all of a sudden?
It was definitely a preparation. I mean, at least for me, which is one of the things that I encourage people that are trying to go into, that want to go for a management position. What was the most beneficial in preparation for me was is the whole learning from failure. I think I interviewed um, twice for 2 or 3 times. Only once for the role and failed that I really really wanted, and the others were in preparation. So um, to back up overall, kind of as a my experience and what I encourage other people is to do when they're trying to go through this is make your intentions known, right? Until you get out there and actually interview for the first job, and make it known that this is something that you want to do. You probably don't have people leaning in to mentor you near as much until you actually go through and do it. And that was kind of the catalyst for me. Was I went for that first one, and it was an utter failure, and I learned a ton through that experience. I thought that the job was a lot different than what the job really is, and it was an opportunity for me to mature in it, to get more involved. People wanted to involve me and encourage me now since I made that known. But I think it was over the course of like 9 months, 9 to 12 months that I prepared, relatively intensely. And luckily VMware grows so fast that there's always some kind of opportunity coming up. And our organization grew so big that we ended up splitting the region. And I took one geography, and my old boss took the other geography.
Oh, wow. Now, how did that conversation go with your boss when you made the intentions known? Because I'm assuming you did that before you took the interview.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's usually the right thing to do, right? Because I think that's a really really big big question or topic also, Nick, right? I've been lucky, and this is kind of kind of molded me as a manager, but I believe in having a lot of career conversations with the people on my team, and I think it's important to encourage transparency. Like, I even encourage transparency. Like, if you want to go interview for a job outside of VMware, interviewing is a skill, and any skill you don't use, it's going to get dull. And so we've got to practice those skills. Now, I don't want you to actually get that job if it's outside of the company, but I do want you to be prepared for the time that it does really matter to you to get it. So back to I'd had the same, not that quite transparent with my boss at the time, but he had he was very encouraging to go after it. I knew that he would be very supportive, and not only was he supportive of the interview, he was very very supportive and key to helping me get the position when we split the region. So I think that making your intentions known, to get that support is very, very crucial.
I don't know if this was something that I thought about before, but you mentioned a process of over nine, maybe having a shock and then over a course of 9 months, really buckling down and preparing. And it just really triggered this memory of almost every single person that we've talked to that's gone after an advanced certification. They maybe had like an early, realization of how hard it was going to be and how different it was from their expectations, then buckled down and then, kind of set out to have, you know, more of a serious approach to, getting that technical certification. And there's no real thing as like a career certification, right? But you almost really should be studying for that new skill and set of knowledge the same way that you would study for a technical certification. I don't know if there's a question there, but it's just something that I thought of when you said you studied for 9 months.
It kind of, to compare it to the certification, John, like the way that I see, and actually, Nick, I think you and I have had this conversation before. The way that and maybe this explains why I see interviewing this way, but the way I've always done certification tests is I'm perfectly fine to go out and fail it the first time, because then I know what the questions are going to be, so that then I can prepare for the time that I really want to go and ace the thing. So that's kind of the way that I saw the opportunity to learn what I needed to do to become a manager as well. Is let's say I bombed the test in the first interview, right? I didn't know what I should be thinking about. I didn't know what my leadership philosophy was. I didn't know, what I needed to be responsible for running the business. Like it really just wasn't the forefront of what I was pretty sure I knew what to tactically do as a manager, but that was a small percentage, and allowed me to bomb the test. But now I knew the questions, and I knew what to pay attention to, and I knew where I needed to learn over the course of the next 9 to 12 months, and it allowed me to get significantly better at being ready to take the job. Because I mean, I don't know if everybody feels this way, but at least within the same company, I've always felt like when I've gotten the job, I was already kind of doing the job. You know what I mean? In some way, shape, or form, I was already doing pieces of the job, and then somebody allowed me to do it full time.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. I was just curious, once you realized the things you needed to do after hearing what the questions were like, what sources did you seek out for help? Was it people inside the company, outside the company, books, networking, all the above?
Mostly networking and mentorship inside the company. Me. Now, I wouldn't encourage that. I think I was a little short-sighted, right? I think that it's important to take a look at it and spread that mentorship, out as wide as you possibly can. I highly respect the people that are able to, keep up with that network, because I'm not good at that. That's just something that I know I need to be better at. Even even if you talk to my friends from college, they'll be like, yeah, that's not something Brad's good at. So it unfortunately is a thing that I'm not highly skilled at in my career as well. So I stayed very close to the people that were part of my everyday and got mentorship from them. And that's the way I did it. It was enough, but I don't think it's the best way to do it.
So having made the jump to manager, were there any lessons learned once you started doing the job that you had only done pieces of? Like, oh wow, this is actually something people managers do that I could never realize until I did it?
You mean like, are you asking directly for tasks or just lessons learned in the first 6 months?
Yeah, lessons learned in the first 6 months, like the shock of, oh, okay, this is actually what I have to do.
Um, yeah. So I would say that the biggest thing that I learned in the first the first 6 months is hiring is really, 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 really important. My first hire, I kind of rushed into and hadn't developed my process yet, and especially when your leadership philosophy is like mine, where trust but verify. They're the experts. I'm not a super SE kind of SE manager. That's not me. Um, so you can't really have that strategy if you don't hire the best. And I unfortunately took some bad advice from different people, and my process wasn't honed at that point in time. So I now understand why hiring processes can be brutal as a manager, as someone who's an interviewer, or for interviewees. It's really, really tough. How much goes into that and how emotional it is was something that I don't think I was prepared for. Some other lessons learned. I'm very
No. We're going to talk about that.
Okay. All right.
No,
Let's
that-
jump
John
in
just
there.
found the rabbit hole he wanted to jump down.
Okay.
No, that's fascinating. The emotional toll that it can take. I think that most people in their lives, there's a smaller fraction of people that ever are managers who have to hire. And even of those, not everybody, works at an organization that has to have like as rigorous a process as like some, the enterprise companies that we work for. So maybe you can, talk about that. I think that, people don't understand why the hiring process is as you said, brutal as it is. Somebody, an HR person reaches out to you and says, hey, I want to, you look good, we do a phone screen, I'm going to get you to a hiring manager. And then you don't hear from them for, 3 weeks. And then you actually do have the interview and they say, great, we're going to get back to you by the end of the week. And you don't hear that from them for 3 or 4 weeks. There's people just assume that there's like malice in that sometimes. Right. But behind the scenes, it sounds like there's quite a lot going on. And maybe if people know and understand, they would de-stress about it a little bit more.
Yeah, and there's two big pieces of it that I wish that I could, anybody that's interviewing, anywhere, and I wish that they could understand two big pieces of it. And the first is like if you get an interview and you get to go through the process, you should feel good about the fact that, okay, I can do the job. You wouldn't be, down the process if you couldn't do the job. And what I mean by that is that it's not the person that gets the job isn't the only one that can do it. The person that ends up getting the job is the person that's best fit for that unique situation. They're the best. They're the cream of the crop. They're the top. So, while it is just, emotional to get that, no, you weren't selected. And I don't think there's anything that I can say that, is going to help anybody with that emotional roller coaster. Just remember that this isn't like, oh, I need to hire an SE. Any old SE will do. I'm hiring specifically for a situation where, I know how that person needs to fit on the team. I know, what kind of business we need to run with these customers. Are they very strategic? Are they tactical? Do we have a good relationship? Do we have a bad relationship? Like, we're analyzing it to that point. So, just remember that just because you weren't awarded the job doesn't mean that anybody on that team, on that hiring team, thinks that you can't do it. Does that help?
Yeah, that really helps. I've never actually heard that before, so that's really good advice, Brad. I appreciate that.
So then the other thing, which ties in as well, in my opinion, and John, I'm with you about the time, man. The weeks that go by are just brutal. It is awful, and I had one process that drug on for like 3.5 months. And shout out to the SE that stuck with me there, because he was the right person for the job, and it just it process after process after process. Anyways, things got crazy. But the reason that I run my process the way that I do is because being a part of a team and leading that team is really crucial at the way that we do things at VMware, especially for the segments that I hired in before in enterprise, and now that I'm hiring in for globals. You have to lead that team, and everybody has to be invested in following you. So my process includes the salespeople that you're going to be paired with, the sales manager that you're going to be paired with, other SEs on the team, because my belief is that if those people are invested in picking you, then they're also going to be invested in your success, which is going to make you successful. So it's difficult to get all those people aligned to let everybody who should have a tidbit in saying you're the guy. It takes time to get all that done, but I believe that you're going to be more successful if all these people feel like they have their stamp of approval on you. Then they're invested in you, and they want to be invested in your success and see you do well.
That makes a lot of sense. I can completely understand, a process that basically aligns the stakeholders and that person's success with, helping to choose the person who's going to fill that role. And I can also see how that would take, more time than just, one person saying, yeah, I think this is the right person. Boom. As if there are no other stakeholders, including, the manager's manager, right? Or including the person that they're going to be working with on a day-to-day basis like that. It almost doesn't make sense to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and if you're out there listening, you need to understand that the process would likely not be as thorough or as long at a smaller company. Doesn't mean it couldn't be, it's just less likely.
Yeah, I think that whole thing is more important the more matrix the organization is. To your point, Nick, smaller companies typically don't have that massive matrix, relationship, where big companies like VMware, Google, EMC, Amazon, you've got specialist upon specialist that help make you successful. And, everybody that can put a rubber stamp on you and be invested in your success is now following you a lot more.
Interesting. Thanks a lot for that insight.
Yeah. Here's a question, Brad. So after you learn these lessons and get a feel for what a manager does, and hey, is this really what I wanted now that I have it? How do you determine if the people you manage would be appropriate for a management career path, even if maybe they never thought about it?
Um, I think that the fundamental of that question, Nick, is I feel that my role in as a manager, as a leader in someone's development plan, is to empower the plan that they have put together and provide them insight in how to accomplish their goals. So the reason I lead off with that is the fact that I'm not going to encourage anybody on my team to go into management unless they've come to me and shown interest in it. So that to me is the first gate. And then they show interest in it. I'm going to help them put together a plan and share, here's how I went about it. And it was very powerful for me. The first thing you need to do is talk to other people about their journey, and then we'll talk about what you want to put together, and I'll help you go do all those things. And let's give some examples of what that plan might include. Maybe it's some training classes on how to be a people manager, right? I took one of those before I went into people management. It was great validation. Oh, okay, I kind of do know what I'm talking about. It wasn't a training to get me there. It was more of okay, I should show some confidence in what I'm doing. So maybe that's something that we'll put into the plan. Maybe something that we'll put into the plan is, I think a lot of SEs suffer from, especially in a big company, people don't know exactly who they are or what they want to do. So we've got to go on some type of brand building journey. Like, why does my boss's boss need to know you? And what do they need to know about you? What are you good at? Those kind of things. Because what I think in a management, especially if you're moving from an individual contributor to your first management job, it's better for your success if you're kind of handpicked for that role because of certain skills and certain things about you that people know, right? For this role, as a perfect for instance, the reason that I was kind of picked to move into this globals role is because we're repairing relationships and focusing on white space and under penetration in some of the accounts that I'm focused on. And so applying some of the principles, that we've applied in more enterprise size accounts are going to be very, very valuable. And that's kind of become my brand. Is I'm kind of a process guy. Let's take best practices and recreate them in a bunch of other places. So that's part of my brand. So someone told my new boss, hey, this guy might be good for this. And that's how I lucked into, even getting an interview for this role. So circle back, land the plane to where we were going, is I think that all those different things, brand building, training, opportunities to showcase, doing the job before you're actually doing the job is part of that plan that you need to build. I'm going to help you build, and then you're going to give me tasks to go do to empower you on that. So I see that's my role as the manager. I don't do a lot of mentoring and coaching because I think that anybody that wants to do this kind of has to figure that out on their own. Sounds a little callous, but I think it's the best way to learn.
Well, it sounds like your process is a bit of a sniff test in and of itself to see if that's what they really want.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hate to think of it that way because to me it seems that I'm not encouraging and I'm not coaching and I'm not out for the best of them. I'm waiting for them to do something on their own. But I kind of think that we all need to do that in our career, right? We got to find what we want and grab it and chase after it. And I'm going to run right beside you. But if I don't know where you want the finish line to be, I don't know how to help you lay out that path.
Well, it also, just to go back, it didn't sound like you were saying that you weren't coaching and weren't mentoring. Maybe I'm just clarifying, you weren't encouraging people to pursue this specific line of moving their career forward. Like in general, you said you are having lots of career discussions, right? But maybe pushing somebody and suggesting that they go this specific way is not really something that you do. Yeah. Am I hearing you correctly there?
Yeah, you put it much better than I did. I kind of jumped down in the rabbit hole and ran around a little bit. You said it much more concisely, John. Thank you.
That's my brand. That's okay. that implies, I think, in my mind, that you're cultivating an open and honest relationship and encouraging the people that you're managing to have that um, aspirational discussion with you. Like as so, you have to cultivate a safe relationship, right? For them to say, "Hey, I don't want to work for you forever." Right, because that's a difficult thing to say to your manager who holds your performance review in their hands, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And to that point, I haven't had any serious career development discussions with anybody on my new team, and I've been in this new role for 9 weeks. And I told them up front, I was like, "Look, guys, I don't think that I can really coach you or mentor you or encourage you to do anything until we've got a personal relationship. So I'm not even going to schedule our career development conversations for at least the first 2 months. Right now is kind of that renewed career development conversation time at VMware where everybody's like, oh, yeah, I need to put together IDPs, individual development plans. Sorry, company of acronyms. And some people scramble to do all that. And I just told my team, look, I take those seriously, and we're not doing them until I have a personal relationship with you guys. Then we'll get on it, and it will be something that we talk about. I do it every 6 weeks with my team outside of the one-on-one, so that it does, to your point, John, encourage that open and honest relationship where we're talking about career goals only, and not just career goals, but monetarily as well. What are your expectations? What do you need to continue to be here and feel valued?
Wow. Yeah, you really need to be able to feel safe in order to talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, some of the conversations you and I have had, Brad, because I have worked for you, full disclosure, about career is kind of a, hey, here are the directions I see as possibilities for me in the next step in my career. What's your feedback on my qualities and whether you think I'd be fit for that? That's a perfectly okay question to ask your manager, because they're going to have a different insight than you might of yourself. It's good to get that feedback. It was when I asked Brad, anyway.
Yeah, I remember those. I remember those conversations fondly, Nick. I hope that I hope they were always positive for you, my friend.
Yeah, always good for sure.
They're like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, he wouldn't
Because
say it in public anyways.
we were usually eating sushi, so yeah, it was good. But you mentioned in the spectrum of promotions, a lot of times the person's boss's boss needs to know their brand. How do you help someone understand how their boss's boss thinks, so your boss?
Oh, you mean like how they think? I think especially when you're talking about brand, typically you're dealing with, it's kind of like a net promoter score, right? And the reason I bring that up is because neutral is almost just as bad as bad. Usually you're dealing with a lack of brand as opposed to a negative brand. And so, I think that I think that's the way you have that conversation, to let them, you have the conversation around brand and just ask, what do you think other people think of when they hear your name? What do you want them to think of when they hear your name? What do you want them to think that your career goals are? It's relatively easy in my mind when you think of it that way, because moving from neutral to positive in a brand situation is it's not that difficult if you have done the work. If I ask someone, what do you want your brand to be, and they don't really know, or, well, what do we need to tell people about you, that will encourage them to think of you the way that you want to be thought of. If you want to be a thought leader, what thought leadership initiatives have you taken on to to be recognized as a thought leader? And if it's crickets, then it actually helps with that development conversation, right? I don't have to point out to you that you're not doing something. You just found it out on your own. You just answered the question on your own. So I don't think that's actually the question that you asked, but in a roundabout way, maybe I'm answering. So, I think that instead of telling, that person what my boss what my boss needs to think about them, just turn it around on them. What do you want them to think? Like, what do you think equals doing a good job? And then the conversation starts creating itself, because that person will kind of realize where their gaps are. And if they're too stubborn to realize it, then it sets other wheels in motion that might be better as well.
Wow, Nick, I didn't want to break in there for the episode break, but we got to save some of that explosive energy for next week. I really enjoyed hearing about Brad's career journey, but how he was preparing for manager interviews was really interesting too.
Yeah, if you notice and listen carefully, John shared some interesting epiphanies during this episode, and he'll share some in the next episode. But yeah, that's a great point. One of my favorite parts of that episode, John, was when he talked about how the hiring process is just really hard, and you don't realize how challenging it is until you have to do it. He spoke to some challenges early on, but he also pointed out some great nuggets for people who might be in the hiring process, whether it's short or lengthy, and some things that frustrate us. And especially the nugget about, you may not have been selected for the job, but if you went deep in the process, that doesn't mean that the people who interviewed you didn't think you couldn't do the job.
Absolutely. That nugget of, like, they thought that you could do the job, and they're just choosing between, the top candidates that they think are all, go-getters. So very, very, very insightful. I actually hadn't connected those dots before.
And I liked Brad's sniff test as to whether people really want to do what they say from a career perspective. The way he forms individual development plans for people who want to go in a certain direction. I like that.
I'm really looking for that, like 100% like say-do ratio. So that's what I'm looking for. It's one of the favorite things that I want to hear.
Right. And when John becomes a people manager, that'll be his philosophy.
Absolutely.
So look for that when he moves up the chain.
Yep.
I guess we should probably get out of here with that one, huh?
Yeah. Anything else before we do that? Or
No. You?
Nope.
Just a reminder, we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @BJourneyman, for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.